So I'm getting distracted from my homework and I want to do something else besides it right now. So I'm going to tell you a story considering it is spooky month. We are in October even though the world is like all discombobulated and can't go back to normal. I'm going to tell you a story about a paranormal happening that occurred a couple years ago to me. I've been listening to a lot of things about UFOs and aliens, and see, there's a real mystique around that out here in the not in the Midwest, in the Pacific Southwest, right? I live in California, Southern California specifically, and so this whole little area of New Mexico, of Nevada, of Arizona has a lot of alien sort of lore around it. And I think it's something that's kind of interesting. It's something that kind of permeates the consciousnesses of a lot of people who live out here. Lots of the desert people are kind of conspiratorial. They're a little funky just because maybe they've been out in the heat for too long. But beyond that, like there is a little bit of a wonkiness through line where lots of people out here they do believe in aliens or they believe in some kind of supernatural occurrence happening in the deserts, just in general. So I'm going to talk about the time in which I didn't really see aliens, but we saw something weird. So I was visiting a friend up in Flagstaff, Arizona. She no longer lives up there, so I'll just disclose the name of the place where we were going. So I was bringing a friend with me. She was actually one of these desert people. She lives out in the deserts near where I live, and so she kind of had some, kooky beliefs about things. Big weed smoker, so kind of plays into that. You start seeing some stuff potentially if you smoke too much weed. High THC count and all that. We were going up to hang out with some of our friends that we knew in Flagstaff, and so we're going up there. These people didn't smoke too often, but it's like if everyone else is smoking, I was gonna smoke too, and it was just kind of like what was gonna happen. And then we kind of like to bullshit and talk about like philosophy and like universal consciousness and all that. So it was just gonna be a good time. We drive out into the forests around Flagstaff, and it's real dark. Like it's different. So I'm used to the desert, and the desert's very wide open. There's its own like kind of emptiness to it that's sort of spooky in and of itself. But then in a forest, it's very claustrophobic. It's very dark. Um, it's very you kind of feel like could be things very close to you that you don't know that are coming up on you, you know, even though like they might be 20 feet away. It's so dark you can't tell. Anyway, we go into the sort of forests around there. And prior to this, I can't say that we had any weird experiences. We just were talking a lot. I'd say that maybe we were scaring ourselves a little bit with some stories, and it didn't help that it was so dark at night. We drove out, and the road and the we drove past some people who were already like had driven down the road to like hang out or they're in like trailers or whatever. Um, and my lights in my car's kind of an old piece of shit, and the lights were not great, so there was already that like layer of darkness, and then it was like the shitty yellowish lights going down the pathway as we drove further out, and eventually we hit a spot that was like about, I'd say maybe like 10 minutes away from the nearest person that we did see, so we weren't too far out. We started to the smoke weed, if that was not implied. Um, we apparently the one friend I had, he had brought some very dank kush, and he had gotten a new bong that was like rubber or something that was going to be uh, I don't know, better delivery, harder to break or some shit. I don't know, but whatever the combination of things that was going on here, when we hit this fucking bong, we got blasted off. Um, Not me, but it like well, I was pretty gone. I took two hits, and then that was like pretty much the game over for me. My brain was not working anymore. Um, and I personally, my brain is very like, what's the right way of saying it? Psychedelically predisposed, I guess, is a good way of putting it. I trip out on very low counts of THC when it's a high THC like weed, and it's happened to me a lot of times. Not all my friends are like that, and my one friend who I had brought her, the desert lady. I'll just refer to them by pseudonyms without actually giving them names. There, I have there was the desert lady, and then there was my Then there's my female Flagstaff friend, and then my male Flagstaff friend. I can give them fake names, but I'll just come up with something. Uh, I'll just refer to them as that. There's two girls, one guy. Then there's me. Um, yeah, so I'm blasting off because my brain is just sort of like I'm coming down, but it's like I'm not like hallucinating so bad that like I can't understand what's happening around me, or that I have to lay down, or I have to like to rest. I was doing fine as far as that goes, but it was definitely a lot to handle. And then my two, other than the guy who bought the weed, and my desert friend, they keep going and they take another like two or three hits, and then my other friend from Flagstaff, she doesn't smoke at all, so she's the sober one in this situation. They keep smoking, and eventually they stop and because my desert friend, she kind of like trails off. We're all talking. It's dark, so we can't really see each other, but we're all talking, and she stops talking back, and she stops responding. And so she is like staring off, apparently, into like the back of one of my seats. She's in the back of the car, and I'm in the driver's seat. And everyone's like, "Are you okay? Are you okay? What's going on?" And she's just gone. She's gone. Um, and we're trying to bring her back, and we don't really touch her because that can like if she's on like a trip or something, that can like send her into a bad place. um Eventually she breaks it, and she's like, I just saw, I had a vision. And we're like, whoa, really? And she said that she saw, she said she saw an alien spaceship with ancient clothed lizard people, and that they were standing in a spaceship above the Earth looking down on the planet, and that they had seen her looking at them, and when they saw her, the vision dissolved. And she probably saw more, but that's all I remember from that. And so she just was really freaked out about it. But for a moment, we're like, well, that's just, your weed vision. It's a very creative weed vision to have, but, you know, I, it's possible. And so she eventually starts to like perk up again and start talking. And so then the girls wanted to talk in the car, and so me and the other friend from Flagstaff, we both get out, and we step out and we start to talk about bullshit, and we're both really high, so we don't really know what we're talking about. um, and we just stare off into the darkness, and something I notice is that my eyes are giving me very slight hallucinations. It's nothing big enough that I'm like, oh God, I'm tripping out. Like I can clearly tell that if I am like hallucinating at all, which I was, it's not going to be a progressive hallucination where it gets worse. I'm on the back end of whatever I'm feeling. I'm not on like the front end going into worse visions or something like that. So these little black shadows are like detaching from the larger shadows of the trees in the darkness in the surrounding forests, and sort of moving. But when I try and focus on it, they go away. It's like eye floaters. You know that? Like when you try and look at an eye floater that's like floating in your vision space, you try and look at it, but it moves because it is just like it's a floater in your eye trying, and when you move your eye, it moves with your eye, so you can't look at it directly. Um, that's what was happening with these shadows. It was like detaching and moving, but in my periphery, so I couldn't really tell what was happening with them, and it kind of was scary because they were kind of forming into like figures, but I didn't really think of anything of it because I'm like, that's just hallucinations. That's not really anything. Um, and then I keep just sort of like shooting the shit with my other friend, and I keep looking at these shadows because it's just interesting to watch. One breaks off and like moves, and then I just am playing a game with the shadows at this point where I make them dissolve by looking at them, and it moves, and I focus on it, and it's dark. It's like a dark patch, and it moves across my vision, and I can see it, and I can see it, and then it starts to glow with like a little bit of a light, and I'm like, oh, that's weird. Maybe that's just a stronger hallucination than what I'm used to, and I'm like, that's clearly a it's not real because I was just playing games with these little specks this entire time, and it moves across my vision, and it moves right, and then it moves kind of west of me, and it gets a little bigger, and it's floating, and it's bright, and I'm like, what is that? What is that? my brain is totally not it's totally not functioning or processing what this thing is, because eventually it flies and it's like becomes a thing in the sky, and it flies over our car, and then everyone else sees it too, and they all are looking at it, and then there's a light that is pouring down onto me and my friend in my car, and then I hear a rotary sound, a helicopter sound. I realize it's a helicopter. It's a helicopter just flying above our car in the middle of the forest. We were near a clearing, so that we weren't totally invisible to the sky. Um, and after I realized it's a helicopter, I'm like, oh, that's not bad. At least it wasn't a hallucination. So I wave at it. Um, it was really close though. It was like I could hear it. It was causing wind. It was low. It was too low. It could have landed in the clearing, but it was really low for some reason. It was so close to us. At which point I'm waving at this thing, and then it kind of moves over into the clearing near our car and starts trying to land. At which point my sober friend, she leans out the car and she said, "Get the fuck in the car," because you know what? This could be the police, and it's not legal to smoke weed in the state of Arizona, and they could have figured out that we were out here. I don't even know how they could have figured that we were out there, but like they found us, so we have to leave now. So I'm like, oh yeah, yeah. And here's the thing: I am high, but I'm not as high as those two. My other friend, my sober friend, she can't drive. I have to drive. I get the fuck in the car. I pull out, and the helicopter is landing. I don't even know what the helicopter is doing because I'm still like kind of fucking out there. I'm not totally cognizant yet of the situation. I pull out, I like turn around, and I can't even tell how fast I left. I must have left kind of fast, and I don't even know. I think the helicopter trailed us. I feel like it did because it was like I don't know what it was even there for. And I was so high, I was just like, I got to leave now. And like I don't know if I sped down the road. I probably tried to. I was afraid, but I was high, so I was like probably not trying to wreck my car on the dirt road that it wasn't built to drive on. We sped off down the road, and I think it trailed us a little bit, but I'm not 100 on that. And we eventually hit people again, like other little RVs were set up out on the dirt road, and we got all the way out there, and I was just trying to like tell the difference between trees and dirt because like there was the light still didn't make quite sense to my eyes anymore, and so eventually we hit the main road and then the highway, and then we drove off down the highway, and I could at least tell that there were those like lines and dividing lines on the highway and the lights. It was uh, I wasn't freaking out as much as bad because like the adrenaline finally kicked in. I could tell what was happening. We get back to the apartments where they lived, and we sit down. We hear helicopter noises the entire night, and we're not really sure what happened. We just are like that was really odd and out there, and I don't know what to even do with any of this information because I don't know why they found us. I don't know what they were looking for, and I don't even understand what triggered that entire event. My one friend the desert girl who had the visions said that in her stupor, because she was still, you know, intoxicated, and she was still very high. She said that she saw it and it looked like a spaceship to her. Now, obviously, she was high and she just saw visions, and she's not totally all there. I just like that ending to the story because it, it was such a weird event. I don't know what happened either, and it kind of all tracks as a through line. The one little piece of the story I will add is that afterwards, when we were leaving town, the cops did pull me over later, and they told me it was because I was going too slow. And they said they were checking my car for weed. I didn't have weed in my car. We smoked it all. Um, so that was another weird thing. So like that's a little bit of a maybe they were tracking us. That's a little bit of a combination of like an alien story and like a government conspiracy story. So that was my spooky, potentially like conspiratorial video topic I wanted to talk about. So yeah.